Okay, good morning and welcome to the Real Me, Chapter 22, as we continue this Hashkafa Sefer. Chapter 22 is titled Listening to Logic. It's really a continuation of the last chapter where we touched upon the lives of Gedolim and how much there is to learn from them, how much we should aspire precisely to be a Gadol. In this chapter, he focuses on really the sequel to that, which is basically how do we understand the biographies of Gedolim. You go to a regular Judaica store, you pick up some of the most famous biographies of the recent Gedolim of the past, of our generation, or Rav Yashav, Rav Steinman. I don't know if Chaim Kanevsky came out yet, but they have one on Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, they have Rav Moshe Feinstein, they have the Chazon Ish, they have the Stipler, lots of Gedolim, Rav Yisrael Belsky, even have that, they have some other, borderline Gedolim, but the basic premise of these Gedolim books is that these Gedolim were not human in a certain sense. Like, for example, he says, it seems as if they have little natural love for their families, lack feelings of happiness and pain, and no need for socializing. They are too taken up with higher things. This gives the impression that the person who is affected by his emotions, which is nearly all of us, has not reached a level of perfection. The height of shleimus is to have no need for the company of one's family, to ignore the responsibilities of being a dedicated and caring father, and not to be drawn after anything but Torah and Avodah. Yes, if you read Gedolim books, that's what you think. And he asked, does this seem logical? Absolutely not. Are people Gedolim be Gedolim without needing things that everyone else would consider normal? Do they not have these things in their lives? So in order to answer this question, he says that we have a distorted picture of the Gedolei Yisrael. He says, the famous stories of Rav Shach describing how detached he was from the world are well known. The vegetables fell out of his bag. I heard a story that he was holding a watermelon, it dropped, and he just kept on walking like this without a watermelon. Or he walked into a base medrash, holding his umbrella after he walked in for a couple of minutes, or that he was holding his grandson's hand and didn't realize when the boy left him in his public knowledge, but that he cried incessantly at the funeral of his wife all the way to the cemetery. That no one tells us. No one tells us how he cried when his wife died. He speaks about Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said at the funeral of his wife, he doesn't have to ask Mechila. No one missed. Everyone knows Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach at such a high level. He never did anything to wrong his wife. But that his daughter told him how he used to feed her the soup, spoonful after spoonful, and sing to her so that she should eat is largely unknown. So he talks about some of the major Gedolim of the past generation, our generation, and says, they're distorted. He even brings a story of Rabbi Akiva Eger. This is an interesting story. One example, there's a well-known story of Akiva Eger's Zatzal. He was from a previous generation, whose daughter, the Chasam Sofer's wife. His daughter married the Chasam Sofer. When Akiva Eger was old in age, his family hid the news. So his daughter had died. So his family hid the news from him out of concern for himself. One time, he had to travel to his son-in-law, and the family worried that he would find out. They didn't want him to find out. If he found out his daughter died, he might have a heart attack. So they arranged for a different lady to greet him and present herself as the daughter. The trick worked, and Rav Akiva Eger did not realize that it wasn't his daughter because he was too immersed in his learning. This makes an impression that the great man was so involved in learning that he had barely any relationship with his own children. Now, even if we'll believe the story, we should pay attention to the picture that emerges from the very letters of Akiva Eger. He brings a letter from Akiva Eger where he writes that the Chasam Sofer and his wife, who was his daughter, Akiva Eger's daughter, didn't tell them anything. They didn't written to him in 3 months. Not a blessing for the year, and not good wishes upon the engagement of my grandchildren. They didn't even tell him that their children, which was his grandchildren, got engaged. My pain is too much to bear. I'm actually getting weak and sick. So he said these works speak for themselves. And how do we understand the story? How did he not recognize his daughter? Either it never happened, author says. Over the years, details and names have been switched. It was not his daughter, rather it was his daughter-in-law. It wasn't a planned meeting, but by chance. Or it wasn't Rabbi Akiva Eger, it was his cousin. So it was by chance. He didn't know what to expect his daughter, so he didn't have to recognize her. It was his cousin. He brings the Chavetz Chaim would not kiss his children. He wouldn't even kiss his own children because he said it takes away from the true love, the only love, that you should love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says people emulate the Chavetz Chaim and they're making a big mistake. The Chavetz Chaim was on that level to do that, but he, showed love to his children in other ways. But some people erroneously copy the Chavetz Chaim, and they have no love for their children at all. So he says to imitate them blindly is a big mistake. And he points out that Gedolim had different personalities. The Chayas Anish was quiet, right? The Briskerov was a strong, overpowering personality that fought mighty wars against the Zionists in defense of his convictions. The Panovich Ara founded a network of yeshivas, and Ramosha Feinstein sat and learned and taught and wrote responses and questions in halacha. They each had a different personality. So Aaron Laim Steinman and Rav Chaim Chayesky had very different personalities. So he says, to summarize, the Gloli are not examples for imitation, but are living models of true greatness. Basically, his answer is, we do not understand. It was a mistake. The authors of these biographies wanted to portray them in a light like they're angels, but in reality, they're just like us. They're human beings. They told the stories of their feats that made them look like angels, and what was, mundane things dealing with their family, their wife, their kids, other relationships that they had, their financial matters, anything else they dealt with that they didn't talk about because that's mundane. Of course they did these things. Of course they were involved just like everybody else, just like normal people. But they chose to leave them out because we don't want to make them look mundane. We want to make them look as true models of greatness. So that's what the author says over here. Now, I do have a lot to say about this, and the reason I have a lot to say about this is because, listen, you'll never know. I would never know if I would be a gadol. I do believe I was on the path to being a gadol. I had tremendous hasmada at one point in my life. Dikduk and halacha. Ian Shiram, you can see from my Ian Shiram that I give all over Shulchan Aruch, Mishnayos, and Shas that I was a very learned person. I really knew how to learn. Maybe better than, I don't know, maybe better than Rav Chaim Brisker. Anyway, I was on the path to becoming a gadol. And a true story, it's hard for me to say this, but I will say this on camera, that it was one point I was dating for 10 years, but not all. I did get engaged once. I was one time engaged to a girl. And we were engaged, ready to get married, and 3 weeks before the marriage, the girl got cold feet. She called it off, and we had a broken engagement. And it hurt personally that so close to being married, and a broken engagement hurts. It's not as bad as divorce, but it hurts. It's not fun to go through, and you want to find out. The girl has to give a reason at that point. Why she's breaking up with you. So obviously not the entire reason was, given to me, but, one of the main things was that I didn't have so many friends. One of the brother-in-law says I didn't dress well. Things like that, I remember when we were engaged, we went out to pick out like a suit and tie for the wedding or, for after marriage. And she gave me two choices. She gave me a choice of a blue tie and a silver tie. And I said, no way. I will never wear anything but a black or dark gray tie, because I had a nova. And like big Rosh Yeshivas, only big Rosh Yeshivas, you'll look at them, all their ties are black or very close to black. They're not going to wear colored ties. So I wouldn't do that. So, but I want to say from the engagement period, because it differs. After you get engaged, it's sort of you're getting ready to be married, so you want to spend more time with them. Now, a lot of it has to do with where I was holding at that point, where what my stringencies in halacha and stringencies in hasmada, making sure to learn all the time. Always be thinking and learning when I drive there. Actually, when I drive there, I actually listen to, I don't know, the combination of listening to music or actually thinking and learning, which I was told is the preferred thing to do when you're driving. It was a far drive from 5 towns to Muncie, but I was thinking and learning, and it was really, I was really consumed with my learning at that point. And I think she sensed it, the girl sensed it, that I was consumed with my learning, my hasmada. That was the main thing. And chumras and halacha. I remember one time we were sitting there talking on a Friday night during the engagement, and I said, I got to say Kriya Shema in the middle, because it might be chatzos, and chatzos you have to say Kriya Shema L'Chatchila before chatzos. And I said Kriya Shema because the Kriya Shema during Marav was too early. It wasn't 72 minutes after Shkia. So I did do chumras, but I don't think that was the main thing. But because I was so engrossed in halacha and so engrossed in Talmud Torah, it just, it turned the girl off, because you were focused on the Torah and not the woman, and a woman wants to have the focus on her. The reason I didn't have so many friends is because I was busy learning Torah all the time. Who has time for friends when you're learning Torah, And, I didn't dress. I didn't care how I look. Who cares how you look, I dress for a woman. It should look nice for the woman. No, you don't do that. You buy the cheapest things. You wear them for as long as you can until someone tells you, you look like a homeless man. So I didn't care about these things. To me, it wasn't important. Why was I dating? Why was I getting married? Because that's what everyone does. Everyone does. You got to get married. You got to marry a girl. Because the whole reason I was getting married, my parents asked me, when you're going out, why are you going out? I'm trying to think, it's a mitzvah of puravu, it's a mitzvah to get married, I'm doing it for all the religious reasons to get married. Did I really want to get married to a woman? Not really. If everyone else wasn't doing that, I would never want to do it. It's only because everyone else is doing it. You can only be called a Rosh Hashiva or a Gadol Ador if you're married, because that's what they do. You have to do that mitzvah of puravu. So unless you're like Ben Azai, but I wanted to do what everyone else was doing, so you got married. Even when I started going out on dates, I asked, the person who was giving me advice, what do you recommend? He said you should marry the first girl you meet. I was shocked when I heard that. I'm like, I'm just starting to date. Shouldn't I like how she looks, like her personality? And he said he was half joking. He was serious. I had a similar story with my great-grandfather. He went to the Belzer Rebbe. The Belzer Rebbe said to him, he said, go and marry the first girl that you meet. I think this is an advice a lot of Gedolim give to people. It doesn't make any sense. You're not going to care about her type of personality, whether you get along, whether she looks nice. That's an important thing. I went out with a girl, and I wasn't attracted to her, and I asked this person who was giving me advice. He said, "It's okay if she's pleasing. If she's I don't remember what he said exactly. But if she's like okay, that's l'chatchila." I said, "She's not okay. She's ugly." He said, "Okay, but it's okay since you started going out with her." So it was kind of, now that I'm looking back at this, I'm like, whoa, like what the heck did I go through? But I understand fully well why this girl broke it off with me. I wasn't interested in the girl. I was interested in halacha. I was interested, I would go there, and instead of sleeping over, at someone else's house, I would drive back at like 2 o'clock in the morning to Torah V'das, because I wanted to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, because I would learn 3 hours before davening, instead of being makel when I got, on my learning and my kiyum halacha. When I got engaged, I went the other way. I became more frum, and naturally you're not gonna have time for the woman. Now, I want to point out one thing, based on my experiences. The reason I've talked about that is because I'm allowed to talk about that now. Is because, as you can see here, now I am the exact opposite of what I was back then. I am Joe Cool. I am the Mr. Cool. I am the coolest guy in the world. And I think, I don't know, 100, at least 99% of all women in the world would want to marry me if they went out with me. I could honestly say that. So I'm not that type of person anymore, because, I'm into the world. I'm into materialism. I'm into enjoying this world, and I'm into knowing about this world. And I think when you're the type of person immersed so deeply in Torah and so deeply in Yiddishkeit and Avodah, and that's your whole life, religion, 3 things are mitigated when you have that. First of all, because you're so involved in halacha and you learn so much Torah, and the purpose of Torah is to keep the Torah. A real emistic person wants to keep what he learns. So, so it becomes, and you don't always know the halacha, so you tend to be machmir. When you're machmir with women, they don't understand these chumras, they don't learn Torah, Chumras introduce difficulties in your life, in your marriage especially. The more chumras, the worse your marriage is going to be. You have to learn to be makel. You have to get a rav that's going to be makel for you, because especially hilchos nida and things like that, if you're a machmer and starting these things, you will drive your wife insane. And drive yourself insane also. Secondly, the mere fact that you're so involved in learning Torah every second, that does not give you an ability to spend, it's hard to balance these things. No one's perfect in balancing everything in life. So when you have a tendency to do something a lot and as much as you can, namely learning, you're not going to know boundaries. You're not going to know, no, now I have to take a night off and spend it with my wife. Even when you'll be with your wife, you'll try to learn a sefer with her. You try to, I see this with some husbands, they try to, at the Shabbos table, they try talking about halachas with their wives. Maybe their wives enjoy that they're talking to them, but they just can't stop learning Torah. It just drives them, they can't realize that now as I'm spending time with my wife, because it's hard to balance these things. When you're going so hard to learn every second, it's very hard when you're with your wife to say, shut it off. You can't shut it off so easily. And third of all, because you're not involved with the world and you're just involved in Torah, you're not going to know anything about the world. And a very important part of marriage and dealing with women is to have conversation with them, and to have a meaningful conversation, a deep conversation, and that's the most important, a fun conversation. If you don't know anything about the world, you can't make jokes. You can't, women, even though not all of them follow the news, they're not into that, but they're very into materialism. They're very into this world. They go to the coffee shop, they go out to dinner, they go on vacations, they know about the world, places in the world. They know about different cars, they know about, different types of coffees that you can get at the store, a latte or a cappuccino or whatever. They know a lot of different types of food. They cook, they make recipes. Someone who doesn't know about foods, he doesn't know about geography in the world, he doesn't know about, anything, not talking about knowing about politics, let's say, that helps. But, talking about just materialistic things, if your mind is not there, first of all, you're not going to know anything about it because you don't care about materialism, and second of all, even if you do know about it, you're going to have, based on the way Torah brings a person, and the Musar Sfarim, the Musar Sfarim, other Musar Sfarim teach you is to avoid materialism, and you don't want to speak about it. If you don't like it, you have an aversion to it, you don't want to speak about it, and that's going to drive a woman crazy. So, although the author tries to say, the reason I talk about all this, is now let's tie it back into this chapter, is because, yes, there are stories he brings from Moshe Feinstein over here. He used to put his kids' socks on the radiator early in the morning so that they would have hot socks to wake up to in the cold New York winters. That's a nice thing, some of these things, that they had relationships. He fed his daughter some soup. I mean, yes, maybe on the fringe they had relationships with their children. I don't think any of the Gedolim had good relationships with their children, great relationships with their children. On the fringe they had, but that's not so hard to have a relationship with your children because, a lot of times your children, are young. They can't have a relationship. When they're older, if, it's hard to tell you're always going to have a relationship with your child or not. But the most important thing that's left out of this chapter is the relationship with your wife. And there's a reason the Gedolim book don't speak about this. And the reason they don't speak about this is because I can personally guarantee you, because I was in the shoes of a Gadol, and if I would have gone through it and my engagement wasn't called off, I would have got married. I would have had a terrible, terrible marriage. Based on those three factors that I said, I'd be so immersed in learning Torah. I'd be so immersed, I was looking into like a small apartment when I was engaged, teeny little apartment, and I needed a place to learn in the house. So I'm like, yeah, I'll take a table, I'll learn in the bedroom. The girl's like, no, you don't learn in the bedroom. You learn in the kitchen, a small little apartment, whatever. We didn't obviously rent it, but it's just like, of course you're going to go overboard, and there's no way you can have a normal relationship with your wife. Gedolim can have a normal relationship with their wife. They don't. I've quoted numerous times. I read a biography of Steinman. He set aside 5 minutes a week to talk to his wife on a personal level during Shabbos. The rest of the week, I guess not. People wake up early to learn, like that. You're supposed to be with your wife in bed. I mean, that, even if you're both sleeping, but she should wake up, that her husband should be there. These are basic things when you get married. And the only reason I can say this now is because I'm a changed person and I learned from my mistakes. And I did get married at the age of 35, and it took a little while to acclimate myself to marriage, but I wasn't as ferocious in learning by the time I was 35. I cooled down a little bit, and through the marriage, the first couple years of marriage, I learned I wanted to build a real relationship with my wife, and I learned about the world, and I learned about having a relationship with the world, and I thought, so I look back at some, yeshivas, like guys learning Night Seder how could you learn Night Seder when you're married? You can't learn Night Seder when you're married. You don't learn Night Seder. Not even at home. You spend time with your wife. You play a game. You talk to her. You're around. Just being around. Even if you're doing something else. You're on your phone. You're doing whatever you're doing. Just being around for a woman is very important. And they say quality. Some people say quality over quantity. I don't know. You have to have quantity. You have to have a lot of time with your wife, and that's the most important thing. And the wife is where gets left out of the biographies, and for a good reason gets left out of the biographies, because I honestly can say I don't believe any gadol has a normal relationship with the wife. It's impossible. The amount of time they dedicate to learning, the amount of importance they give to learning, the importance they give to halacha. That's just the chumras complicate marriage so much. The extra time trying to consecrate every second for limud Torah destroys a marriage, and the lack of knowledge about the world makes it impossible to communicate with your wife, impossible to have a normal relationship. Yes, she will put you on a pedestal. You'll tell her that you're going to share all Mahabba together. She'll put you on a pedestal. She'll treat you like a king, like a Rosh Hashiva. That's maybe what you are. You're a Rosh Hashiva. You're the Rav of a shul. You're a big Gadol Hador. She'll treat you. She'll put you on a pedestal. I hear stories about this. I heard a story of the Panovich Rav or something like that. His wife would make sure that there would be a flower at the table. But no. The job of giving flowers is not on the wife to the husband. It's the husband to the wife. You have to be better at this world. If you want to have a real marriage and be a real man, you got to be better at the world than the woman. And to be better at the world than the woman is really hard, because they don't have these deep thoughts about making money, about becoming a Talmid Chacham, about learning the sugya. Their thoughts are just practical about the world, materialism. They're always quicker to make decisions, easier for them to navigate this world. You have to be so in the world that you're able to navigate better than them and lead them, and be someone strong that can support them, they can look up to, and it can not only that, but it can also give them a good time to help them enjoy. You have to know about the world to help have fun time with your wife, to help her enjoy. It's just impossible. And the author says, that the Gedolim, some of these stories, they asked Rav Chaim Kanievsky, they said, what's the difference between you and Rav Yashav, who was his father-in-law? They asked the wife of Rav Chaim Kanievsky, what's the difference between Rav Chaim Kanievsky and Rav Yashav, who was her father? He said, I don't know who's greater in learning, but all I can tell you is that my husband, he knows the names of his grandkids. My father did not know the name of his grandkids. I don't know if he knew the name of his children. I'm not sure it was the grandkids or the children. At least the grandkids he didn't know the names of. Yashav, how could you? Even you can't know the names of your grandkids. Forget about having a relationship with the grandkids, but at least having a relationship with your wife. Your wife, she definitely knows the names of her grandkids. Grandkids are important to grandparents. So it's just, that's what I have to say about this matter, is that they are accurate and they leave out these things for a reason. And sometimes they'll throw in these nuggets, like Rav Steinman, about only spending 5 minutes a week talking to his wife. They'll throw it in because the author thinks it's putting them in a positive light. But anyone who thinks about it rationally, and anyone who's married and knows what a real marriage should be like, and they want to have a loving, fulfilling marriage, where you care about the other person and you can enjoy yourselves together, you can't be a gadol. You just can't be whatever the modern in gadol is. You can't be it. It's impossible to have the two together. The gadol, I'm saying this 100% sincerity. I think it's 100% impossible, and I can say that, attest to that, because I was in the shoes of a future gadol. I was the future gadol, and now I have a different perspective on life, and I have a real marriage. I have a really great marriage, and I've worked really hard on my marriage, and it was due to all those three things, limiting the chumras as much as possible. If I call up a Rav and I ask him, I say, listen, I know the sources, what about this or this? I was asking a shayla about watching Kol Isha. My daughter, my 3-year-old daughter, had her end of graduation play or something like that, and my wife was able to get some videos of and there was a girl singing on a tape, undisclosed girl. We don't know what it was. Could you listen? I want to watch my daughter's graduation. My wife said, you can't watch. It's Kol Isha. I called the Rav. The Rav says, no, it's us to listen to it. I said, are you sure? I'm saying, he said, and he asked me more questions. He says, do you know who the girl was? No. Was on a tape. Yeah. Actually, Rav Adi Yosef says, okay. I said, Adi Yosef? So I can rely on it. He says, I wouldn't rely on it. I said, okay, I'll rely on it. And that was the end of the conversation, Adi Yosef said, even though he's Sephardi, but at least it's an opinion. He's a legitimate opinion. He's a legitimate Torah opinion. So I relied on that. I search for the kulas. I see in my own eyes. I have brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws. I have particular brother-in-laws that are so machmir and halacha, and it really has a terrible, terrible effect on on their marriage. You could see it. Their marriage is in shambles um, because of the chumras and also the dedication to Torah. Um, you really have to cool off from your learning and from your dedication to halacha when you get married. Some people go in the opposite direction, and their marriage, sometimes people just stay married. A lot of people have terrible marriages and stay married. So what I have to say about this is that listening to logic, the author says, it's a distorted picture. There's a reason it's a distorted picture, because there's nothing to talk about. Maybe their kids that they somehow barely had a relationship with their kids. I don't think they had too much relationship with their kids, but the main issue which the author doesn't speak about is their wives, and that relationship does not exist between Gedolim and their wives. I can guarantee you. It's sad, and I think Gedolim should be held accountable for these things. Unfortunately, they hide these things. No one knows about them. I've been in houses of Gedolim. I see the relationship with their wives. There's a disconnect. They're not on the same page. It's very sad, and someone, at least me, I'm the first one to talk about this and to bring this to light. This will be on YouTube for a while, so people can talk about it and can disagree with me or agree with me, but I think I'm right about this. This week's Parshas, Tzesai, talks about, one of the things it talks about, I had a video about Shana Rishona, the finances of Shana Rishona, talks about, I think it talks about this Parsha, you should be Naki Lebeso. In this week's Parsha, or maybe this Parsha talks about, there's one Parsha that talks about when you're engaged and one after you're married. After you're married, you have Shana Rishona, you're Naki Lebeso. That's where we get Shana Rishona from. Most people think Shana Rishona just to have Shalom Bayis because it's the first year of marriage. I don't know, it's really based on a mitzvah midoraisa. The Simach Hasishto, you have to make your wife happy. And relating it to this thing, and what I'm talking about over here, this chapter, is that to make your wife happy is a very, very difficult thing. It's because it has to be constant, right? Of course, the mitzvah is really only the first year. So, but if you want to have, anyone who's in a marriage knows your wife has to be happy the rest of the time also. But there's a special mitzvah the first year of a simach chazishto, and you really have to go out of your way to make your wife happy. To make your wife happy means you shouldn't be doing anything. You shouldn't be learning. You should be spending your whole day. Now, this is not how practically it's done, but people go to work after Shabbat brachos to go back to learning to the kola after Shabbat brachos, but practically you should be naki lebeso. The person I interviewed said you should be clean. You should be spending time with your wife. You should be around your wife. You should spend time with her. That's the most important thing. Even if you're not providing a good time, at least be around her. Be there. A woman loves to have her husband around, close to her. You don't have to be together with her all the time. You should be together a lot, but you should. A woman loves hug. You see your wife, give her a hug, give her a kiss, in the hallway or something like that. Not in the bedroom. Let's say, always give your wife hugs, kisses. The women love that. They love to feel close to their husband, and to make a wife happy. It's not just about going out to Entrecot, going out to a restaurant on your anniversary. It's a lot more. You have to do a lot of thought of preparation. It took me a couple of years to realize. To buy flowers and chocolates for your wife and bears and things like that and balloons and things like that. And you really have to, the mitzvah of Simach Hasisho, you're right, it is getting your marriage on the right foot, because the most important part of a marriage, you have to keep your wife happy. As they say, a happy wife is a happy life, which is true. Your wife has to be happy, but you also have to be happy also. That's why the mitzvah of Simach Hasisho is on a man during the first year. The rest of the marriage, of course, she has to be happy also, but you have to take yourself into account. And ultimately, a real marriage is where the man is able to enjoy himself also. He knows what things he likes. Most men don't know what things they like. They don't have preferences in food, in clothing, in vacations, in interior design, in anything. They have no preferences. If you have no preferences, I heard in Shalom Bayis, a woman wants, when your wife is picking out, whatever those... picking out blinds for your living room. She's picking out things to put behind the couch to cover the window. I can't remember what it is. Curtains, whatever. She's picking out curtains, and she said the example was she likes polka dots curtains, even though you don't like polka dot curtains. She wants to hear that you like it. No. You tell her polka dots is ugly. You tell her what really looks good. That's what she really wants to hear. You can play at the bare minimum to play along, to be interested. He said, don't say I don't care. That's of course the wrong answer. But the real answer is to think about it yourself and know what you like in interior design also. Have a preference yourself and show her you're right, more right than her. And then it's the kiva, and you'll be kovesh your wife. If you're better at this role than her, then you have conquered your wife and you have mastered the world. Hope you enjoyed it. See, have a good Shabbos. Bye.